Hello, everyone, and thank you first and foremost for your patience in allowing us here at the Lewis Global Studies Center to get this video uploaded, and secondly, for coming to watch it. I'm Angelo, the Study Abroad coordinator here in the center at the Office for International Study, and we are going to be today talking about specifically for the class of 2024, what are some of those things that you've been asking about. And we are so grateful that you took the time to fill out the survey, and your responses were really helping us inform all of the content that we included today. And your class cabinet also helped us sort of organize our thoughts and put what we thought and what they thought was most important for you in this first of our series. I'm calling it episode 1, and to sort of stagger the rest of the information from here on out. And so what you'll find is that with registration coming up, we wanted to focus today first and foremost on a couple of different topics, the most important of which being the application, your academic questions that you had in the responses to the survey, eligibility broadly writ, and housing as well. We wanted to touch a brief note just on housing and make sure that as you're going through this process, know that Lisa and I and all of our resources that we have at the center are here for you, and on the website. It's all gonna take some time to work through, but trust that we're gonna do everything we can to make you feel as at ease as possible about making your goals come true, basically, for studying abroad. In the following weeks, Session 2 will touch on around the world with programs, and what we want to do is take a closer look at program types in that session, as well as for those of you who it might apply to, thinking about, okay, but what if the eligibility pieces didn't quite describe my situation? And in that case, you might be looking at filing a petition. So we'll talk about that process in the coming weeks. And then finally, right before the Thanksgiving holiday, essentially, we wanted to focus in on some of those questions from your survey responses dealing with COVID, safety, risk management, sort of like what does study abroad while living in a pandemic look like, as well as things like identity and budgeting as well, because finances are definitely a big theme that came up in your responses too. So the main thing we wanted to kind of lead off with was that, this is the moment when you have a couple of semesters under your belt, but you've been exploring things in your curriculum, and now you're exploring this idea of study abroad. So the important thing to note here is that you should definitely still be dreaming big, and we can, kind of take the dream from wherever you bring it to us and shepherd it along through the resources and advising that we can offer in the center. The way to start dreaming big is to actually dig into some of the questions on the study abroad worksheet. So in the physical space, when we delivered this session, we actually had students work through all of the questions on the worksheet. And so if you're watching this digitally now, I would definitely recommend taking 10 to 15 minutes and navigating to this site from the link and filling in the questions. What it asks about will organize your thoughts to do with eligibility, what sort of program type makes sense for me, what's the housing option I feel like is the best suited for me, and so on. So the rest of this session, we'll kind of like keep referencing back to the study abroad worksheet. And this is what it looks like when you navigate to that link. This is what you'll see. After you've been through that, you'll find that the program types, many of them offer varying options as far as housing. And when you select your housing option, you should know that Smith will cover, under the homeschool fees option, Smith will cover term time, that is fall and spring accommodation costs. there's a slight carve out of an exception there if you do choose to go for like a single room with an upcharge or sort of like a higher end housing option, for which you might find some coordination needs to happen there, and that's okay too. But that's really the quick note about housing that we wanted to touch on. And sort of throughout all of this, an important thing to remember while searching for programs, while thinking about what a study abroad even like mean for me, is it feasible, is that it's not sequential, and that you are going through the process on your own terms, and that, you know, whatever that looks like is probably fine. You'll hear me make reference to these things like it may seem like it's coming in some order, but whether you start your program search by thinking about housing first, or by thinking about identity first, or by thinking about, you know, academics first, it's good. Like, that's the way to do it. You belong where you are, and we're here to sort of back that up and make sure that, you know, none of the other pieces in the search for your program and in the application process falls through. So thinking about the search, here is the search tool. This is the application program we call, or the portal we call Sites. And it's where most of you will start your journey. And you navigate here from the applying and funding page on the Study Abroad website. And you can use just a slew of different keywords to find the program options that you feel are right for you. You can also narrow things down by the field of study, by the language of instruction in the country that you're studying abroad in, or by the destination. Now, a note on eligibility. So some of you in the responses to the survey asked, how do I make it work? Where do I start? And the first thing really is to make sure that you've got your major declared. The reason that that's important, and you'll notice that this came up probably in the Study Abroad worksheet as well, is that you, as part of your application, will need to submit something called the Plan of Study form. And so applying for Study Abroad requires you to declare a major, because that Plan of Study form will be a process that you work on in conjunction with your major advisor. And they help you understand which of the courses that I've already taken and that I plan to take while I'm overseas and after I return will fit into which term of my time here at Smith. And then obviously an important factor here is that you're kind of maintaining your likelihood to graduate on time and meet all of those requirements. Now, if you are a sophomore and wondering, well, gosh, you know, I'm just now thinking about some of these things, and registration for spring is coming up, but I was thinking of declaring in the spring, that's okay. Again, from the applying and funding page, you'll find there is a list under the advising section for the departmental study abroad advisors. And I would definitely send off an email to those folks if you're thinking this is where I believe I may end up majoring, and getting the conversation started. I'm considering studying abroad. I have some programs in mind, or could you recommend me some programs? These are folks who have spoken to a lot of students about their plans, and so they can definitely, you know, get you off on the right start if you haven't already begun thinking about program options that are a good fit for you. Or if the Study Abroad worksheet and the resources here in the center haven't helped you get there already, definitely ask some questions of these folks on this page. And so that answered the question from survey responses like, who do I plan and coordinate with? And, you know, for international students who are studying abroad, what are the requirements? The requirements are broadly the same for all of the students who choose to study abroad while they're here at Smith. For international students who are watching, definitely coordinate with Claire in our office, and understanding that your visa application timelines and that process might just look a little bit different than your other Smithy classmates attending the program, or other students coming from the US attending their program. A couple of other quick things to touch on in terms of general requirements are just that there is the GPA requirement, and the 3.0 GPA is often higher, but not in all cases, higher than the GPA requirement of the specific program that you end up applying to. There is a petition process for that 3.0 GPA, no credit shortage, no academic or conduct probation. And then these are, I think, really, really great and what make attending a Smith program abroad unique because of the language requirement. So where the local language, whether the courses are offered in that language or not, is taught at Smith, the requirement is that you should have a year of that language under your belt. And those are all listed on the page here. In some, that's a minimum of 1 year. In some locations, it's 2 years, and you'll find all of those really good details on either the program page or in our study abroad guide and the resources here in the center. Secondly, another great feature about studying abroad through Smith is that we're not, you know, what's the term, like throwing you to the wolves, so to speak. You, especially for programs taking place in another great feature about studying abroad at Smith is that we are making sure that our students are aware and cognizant of all of the intricacies of the region that they're studying abroad in. So particularly for programs in Africa, there's a requirement to have at least one course related to Africa or themes of racial identity before taking part in a program there. If you're anything like me, your anxiety starts to kick in when you read the eligibility requirements and you start to wonder, but what if this happens and what if it doesn't? So we want to talk about exceptions just very briefly, like which type of petitions can be filed. And like I mentioned at the top, we are going to be diving into the petitions a little bit more in depth in the second session. But for petitioning, you might need to submit a petition with your application if you don't meet the 3.0 GPA requirement, or if you're studying abroad on a program that has not been pre-approved and does not find itself listed on our list of approved programs. If you would like to study abroad in two different programs during different semesters, so fall in France and spring in Latin America somewhere, or if you want to study abroad for a full academic year in the UK, Ireland, Australia, or New Zealand. So make some plans to meet with Lisa in the office in the next month or so, because that's about a 45-minute conversation that you're going to have to petition for your program. And what it does is it helps allow the Committee for Study Abroad make a good decision about why that's important, why studying abroad is important to you. And as I mentioned again at the top, we're going to be touching on this a lot more in depth in the last of our 3 sessions, but we definitely wanted to just make a note about, as the study abroad worksheet mentions, you know, identifying how you might be impacted by your experience based on the way that you present yourself in the world, and identify internally as well. So there could be intersections with the local culture that are different than here, you know, just thinking about like different social issues regarding gender and race, regarding access and inclusion. And so we want you to be kind of considering how those things could be impacted now. And there's a lot of really, really great resources that are linked here on planning for and affirming experience overseas. So you can take a look at different cross sections about being a non-traditional student overseas, you know, identifying with a certain race or ethnicity, finding yourself suddenly potentially like in the majority when you never have been here in the US. Those can be really like big, huge factors and could shape the experience for you in different ways. So it's important to have spend some time while you're applying, unpacking it a little bit. And just know that, you know, nothing is ever quite so simple as to say, in one country, in broad strokes, things work this way, but there are complexities and differences and nuance everywhere. We certainly try our best to recognize that here in the US, but of course, you all know that it can lead to some interesting discussions, and the same will likely happen overseas as well too. But that is basically most of what I wanted to say about affirming your time abroad. I also wanted to mention, sorry, just quickly, that if you find yourself in a situation where you started to kind of think really deeply about these ways that your intersecting identities might be affected by your program location, and we end up needing to have a discussion about kind of like, it doesn't feel like the best fit, then there are definitely alternatives out there, right? And so you can be thinking about like, okay, this is my plan B. Our program application process does allow you to submit a first choice and a second choice as well. All right, so brace yourself, my application's coming. This is, for those of you heading into registration, know that this is a two-step process. You essentially apply to Smith in order to have the approval to leave, and then applying to your program is for the acceptance and being able to then arrive and have that solid flow into your program experience overseas. The first step in that process is really quite a breeze. I'm looking at the page of sites again, but this is your home page after you've gone through the search feature and started an application. So we can see in this example, I am heading to the University of Edinburgh for the spring 2023 semester, and I'm going to just call it out again. It definitely says that this is a step 1, 2, 3, 4 process, but the intricate and detailed pieces within each of those steps is not sequential. So filling out your application might mean you already have your plan of study and your major approval first, and then you're sort of submitting those things before you even have thought about like, what is my statement going to be for why studying abroad is important to me. But what that does by bucketing things into those step 1, 2, 3, 4 is it makes the process really easy. And so you can, like I mentioned, apply for up to 2 programs on sites, and the deadlines are in February of this academic year. So if you're thinking about going abroad in the fall of 2022 or the spring of 2023, like the screenshot we have here, application deadlines would be in February this year. Here again is that plan of study. And so in the survey responses, there were questions like, will my classes count? And I wanted to point out here that the courses listed here that are signed off on by an advisor will get approved for credit when you return home and put through that application to have your study abroad program applies credit on your Smith transcript. Other survey questions asked about what are my chances, what are the levels of cultural integration, and so we wanted to touch briefly on this section here. When you're applying to your program overseas, thinking about, again, from the worksheet, who you want to take classes with is important, because some programs can be modeled in a study abroad center way, and these are where the courses that are being offered and the students that you're there with are strictly focused on study abroad students from the US. That is a wonderful program type for those who are thinking about, like, I want to have the support and the surrounding of friendly faces that I know I can rely on when needed, and have the really like built-in support of staff on the center who are all about your experience. An integrated center operates much the same way. In those cases, you have an opportunity to enroll with some of your courses at the local institution. And so there you're having more exposure to other international students or the locals, in fact, as well. The field study program type is where as much learning happens outside of the classroom as it does inside the classroom. So on our approved programs list, when you spot a program with a long title and it's kind of really clear that this is for students within a particular major or field of it, like they have a particular interest in this area, those would likely be our field study programs. SIT programs are this way, SFS programs are this way. And so they either focus heavily on experiential learning to do with undergraduate research, and they do some really super jazzy research as well, impactful stuff, or an internship component. And the last of the program types where, like, you're in terms of answering that question, like what's my cultural integration level, the direct enrollment option, this is what you'll find mostly in the English speaking world and in a few other regions as well. This is where you're plugging directly into the university population overseas. And so a lot of times Smith students appreciate this option because it gives them the independence and allows them the sort of agency to mix it up and get involved with locals and international students on the ground in their locations. Important to note that at a lot of these options, the student populations are 10, 15 times bigger sometimes than the population here at Smith. So be prepared for a much larger campus environment. Now, I don't want to belabor this point too much because we're going to dive in and go on around the world in the next session as well. But just to touch quickly on a couple of things that might land you in a sticky situation with applying to your program for acceptance is applying after the application deadline, which will be well after Smith. You do have to remember that it's a two-step process. You can recycle some of the materials that you're using to apply for the Smith approval to leave with the application to your program to arrive, but there are two separate deadlines, and you'll want to keep that in mind. Also, not meeting eligibility requirements on the program end. Again, GPA, class prerequisites, if you wanted to take specifics that are important for you to progress in your major or with other electives, just make sure that you're thoroughly reading through all the application materials, course syllabi, etc. And lastly, sometimes programs have rolling admissions, and so you might find that while not necessarily competitive, it is important to get like your application in sooner than the application deadline, like much sooner for certain programs because they may meet their cap. And all of the current information out there about those specifics, like mentioned syllabi, program caps, application deadlines can be found on the application websites for those programs. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this session. I want you to make sure that you kind of link back to the things that we hyperlinked here. Those were the study abroad worksheet available on the applying and funding page in the study abroad guide, and also the identity resources that we talked about here, because those will set you up for success if you attend this week's session and some of the following sessions. And even if you attend no further sessions, those will at least get you started on identifying which program is best for you and sort of starting some really good questions flowing, creative juices going, and we can sort of work with you and take it from there. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again.